What is going on, guys? Gamers Goon here today with your guys' big board video here for the NFL 2021 draft. I made my top 50. This is my top 50. Obviously, top 50 for everybody is subjective. You might have somebody up in there that I don't have up in there, but I think I did a pretty solid job with my top 50. And I'm not going to count down from 50 to 1 because I think we all know some of the guys towards the top, and it would not be much of a shock towards that. So I'll just count down from number 1. Obviously, I think by far the best player in this draft. I don't think by far, but I think there's a little bit of a gap. If this is Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson's right here. To me, Trevor Lawrence is just a little bit better. I think Zach Wilson will have a better long-term career, but I think as of right now, Trevor Lawrence is the better player. And Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, is the number 1 player in this year's draft, and in many people's opinions, is the number 1 player in this year's draft, obviously. With many people, almost a general consensus, projecting him to be at number 1 here for the Jacksonville Jaguars come Thursday. Then for the second guy on my big board, a guy that I have a lot of faith in, I think he could be very good down the line. I think he could potentially be the best quarterback in this year's draft. At least his ceiling has the potential to be the best quarterback in this year's draft, and that is a quarterback out of BYU in Zach Wilson. Now, Zach Wilson, if you've seen his gameplay, he's a very solid player. If you want to look at advanced analytics, the style his team played, the talent around him was so far below average, and Zach Wilson played so high above the average compared to what he was given with his team. So Zach Wilson, to me, is somebody that will be able to work with very little and have a decent amount of success in the NFL, and I think Zach Wilson might be a perfect candidate to kind of rejuvenate a team such as the Jets at number 2, who they're coming off Sam Darnold. They don't really work out. They really don't have much going for them offensively still. They still need a playmaker. I think Zach Wilson's one of those guys, one of those few guys that could be in this league that could bridge that gap and potentially be something great. Rather than, I had to get my drink and set it over here, and could be something great rather than just something okay and average. Then I think number 3, it might be a little high for some people, but I have an offensive lineman in Penei Sewell. Now, I do know that there's an ongoing debate between There's an ongoing debate between Rashawn Slater and Penei Sewell as who is the best offensive lineman in this year's draft. And I've even heard Christian Darrisaw's name being thrown around there. I think people, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think people realize how good Penei Sewell was in college. He gave up 1 sack. Now, I've seen some people question, he was on the ground some plays, he's unconventional. At the end of the day, he gave up 1 sack. And you want to know who he was blocking for? He was blocking for the best rookie of last year in Justin Herbert. I don't understand why people don't realize that. You can't discredit him because he sat out. And then you give credit to guys like Jamar Chase. You give credit to some of the guys that sat out. But you don't credit Penei Sewell. You seem to have forgotten. I'm going to tell you right now, I told you last year with Justin Herbert, don't underestimate. Just go with what, I don't know where these questions come from about these guys. I watched all of Penei Sewell's games last year, along with Justin Herbert's. And the question about Justin Herbert's I had an issue with because they didn't make sense. And the questions with Penei Sewell, they don't make sense. And now I'm sure if I would have watched some of the other guys that had questions, if I watch all their games, I would sit here and say, it doesn't make sense. But Penei Sewell, to me, is the best offensive lineman in this year's draft. And I think he is a top 3 player in this year's draft. I think he has the potential to be an elite offensive lineman. I think he will be an elite offensive lineman. I think he'll be a Pro Bowler. I really think in 2 to 3 years that he will be one of those constant Pro Bowlers that we see. And I don't understand why some of these people don't think that Penei Sewell is the top guy. To me, it just is baffling. It's baffling. I think Penei Sewell is going to be a very good offensive lineman in this league. Number 4, We had Jamar Chase. Very similar situation. Now, I have gone off on the record before, and I have said that I believe Jalen Waddle will be the best long-term player in this draft at receiver. But Jamar Chase, he has everything you want. He was by far the best receiver last year at LSU, and that is with Justin Jefferson, who went on and had a great rookie year in Minnesota. And he was the consensus number one guy before he sat out. And now people came back and came around the realization that how are you going to pass on Jamar Chase? He's a damn good player. And I'm glad he's getting his hype back. Unlike Panay, who they've kind of been questioning a little bit, I don't see many questions about Jamar Chase. I think he is a very solid prospect. I think he's a very good prospect. I think Jamar Chase is a top 5 player in this year's draft. I really do. Then number 5, and I hate doing this. I really do, but this dude is a monster. This dude can play receiver. This guy can do whatever you want out of him. He ran a good 40-yard dash, and that's Kyle Pitts. I absolutely hate that I have a tight end in my top 5, but Kyle Pitts is different. I don't know what it is about this dude, but he goes out there. He's fast. He's elusive. He runs great routes. You can run him at receiver if you want. He's a good blocker. This dude is legitimately, and I mean legitimately, if you want to put a top tight end in the league like a Travis Kelce, I think you could compare what Kyle Pitts could be with a Travis Kelce, with the Rob Gronkowski in his prime. I think he can be that. I think he can be that, and maybe even better. Because to me, you can run Kyle Pitts almost anywhere. You can run him anywhere on the field. It doesn't have to be at tight end. Very similar to what Kelce does. You can run him wherever you want because he's going to deliver. He's going to be a good player. I absolutely love Kyle Pitts. I think he is a top 5 player in this year's draft. I hate that he's a tight end in the top 5, but at the end of the day, you got to respect the game, and Kyle Pitts' game is there. It is there. Number 6 in this year's big board, I think Micah Parsons at a Penn State linebacker. Now, I don't think Micah Parsons is going to be picked 6th. That's not what this is about. I think he is a great player. I think Micah Parsons is a great player. But obviously there's some character concerns, and I hate that I have to mention that because it's just something you don't want to have, especially when it's controllable. It's nothing that's just random. It's locker room problems that he created back in the past. Is he mature enough to be in an NFL locker room? I hate that is a case, man. Because if you have all the talent in the world, why are you bringing up questions about your character? Just try to be as good as possible. Don't try to raise any controversy in the locker rooms. Don't do anything of that. Don't be a part of a hazing scandal. There's no need. There's just no need. I hate that I have to mention that with Micah Parsons and his character concerns. I hate that he might fall because of it, because he's a damn good player. If it was purely based off football, he is the 6th best player in this year's draft, in my opinion. But that's not what the draft actually is. The draft actually is, you got to think long term. Is this guy going to be on the team 5 to 6 years? Or is he going to have some off-the-field issues? Is he going to potentially be a locker room cancer? You got to think of these things when going into the draft. And with Micah Parsons, I don't know if those questions are answered. I don't know. Some teams might not have those questions, and there's other teams that might. 7th, I have Justin Fields. I'm growing on the Justin Fields bandwagon, man. Chicago, they need a quarterback, and I'm warming up to the idea of drafting Justin Fields if we trade up. I really think Justin Fields is the 3rd best quarterback in this year's draft. I think there's a big gap between him and then the Mac Jones, Trey Lance. What seems to be going on with the 49ers is that they're jumping between Trey Lance and Mac Jones, and they're kind of forgetting about Justin Fields. Now, I do know about the medical with Justin Fields where he has epilepsy and could potentially have seizures, but the family history suggests that he would grow out of it. I do know that. But in terms of football, throw the injuries aside, Justin Fields is the 7th best player in this year's draft, and there's a big gap, in my opinion, between Trey Lance and Justin Fields. And I think there's even a bigger gap between Justin Fields and Mac Jones. I really do. I really do. Next, I have Jalen Waddle, receiver out of Alabama. I think this kid's going to be a star. I've said it millions and millions of times. Jalen Waddle walked out there in the national championship game. You can't question his heart because this man could barely walk. He could barely run, and he did it. He got some yards. He had to limp out there to do it. Jalen Waddle, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, he has heart. He has the big playmaking ability. He's going to be special. And I've done it in the past. I've compared this guy to what Tyreek Hill is for the Chiefs. I think Jalen Waddle has that ability. He is very elusive. He can catch the ball. He's a great route runner. Jalen Waddle is going to be special in this league. If he goes to the right team, I could see him potentially being one of the best receivers in the entire league. If he goes to an okay team, he'll be a good receiver. I don't know if he'll be great, but Jalen Waddle, I'm telling you, I'm a big fan of this kid's game, and even if I'm wrong, I'm going to say it because I've already said it before, and I'll own it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not going to come back and say, oh, I never said that. Jalen Waddle, to me, is going to be the best receiver in this year's class. That is above Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase has the higher floor than Jalen Waddle, but I think Jalen Waddle at the end of it all is going to be the best receiver in this year's class. Number 9, I have Rashawn Slater. See, the thing is, for me, Penei Sewell hits that elite offensive line status. To me, Rashawn Slater hits that all-star status. He's a Pro Bowler. He's a Pro Bowler. I don't know if he is a superstar offensive lineman. I don't know if he's one of those guys that you can build your offensive line around. He's a good supplement piece. He's a very good supplement piece, but you're not going to – I don't know if that's going to be a centerpiece of an offensive line where I think Penei can be. So to me, Rashawn Slater – offensive lineman at Northwestern is actually the second best offensive lineman on the board, and he is actually the 9th best player on my board. Then we get our first cornerback at number 10 in Patrick Surtain. Now, there was some weird things going around earlier this past few months with corners. I've seen J.C. Horn thrown around there. I've seen Caleb Farley thrown around there. I've seen almost any first-round quarterback that you can think of thrown in and above Patrick Surtain. I'm not sure why. Patrick Surtain last year was great. He was great. I don't get how you can look at Patrick Surtain's film, you can see all of his measurables, and then you can say, you know what? Why don't we try to throw Caleb Farley up because we don't really know any reason, but he hasn't played for a year, and his film still doesn't suggest he's better than Pat. So let's take a gamble on getting Farley over. Nothing against Caleb Farley, but it's there. It is there with Patrick Surtain. So that's another one that I'm a little bit baffled about by some people thinking that he might not be the best corner in this year's draft. To me, Patrick Surtain's by far the best corner in this year's draft, without a question. Without a question, Patrick Surtain's the best corner in this year's draft. And then we get Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. Now, to me, Darrisaw and Slater are very similar. I like both of them. I think both of them will be very solid. I don't think either of them will be that elite caliber offensive lineman that you think of when you think of some of the elite guys like Quentin Nelson, or when you think of any elite offensive lineman. I don't think he is that great. I think he's very good. I don't think he's going to be an elite offensive lineman in the case like Penei Sewell, where I do believe he will be. Christian Darrisaw, very good player. I think he might even get a rise on some draft boards on draft night. The guy's going to be very good. 12th, to me, is the Heisman winner, Devontae Smith, out of Alabama, receiver. Man, I really want to say he's the best receiver in this year's class, man. But Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, to me, they're both better than him. They are. I think Jalen Waddle if he was playing, would not have allowed Devontae Smith to even become the Heisman. Devontae Smith more so right place, right time. I mean, that does not mean he's not a good player. That does not mean he's not a great player. I just don't believe Devontae Smith is the best receiver in this year's class. Unfortunately for him, I think he's 12th in terms of overall talent. A little bit undersized at receiver. Hopefully he can make the best of it. I got him at 12 on my big board. Next, we have 13th. And my 13th player in this year's draft is Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Now, obviously, you've heard the comparisons probably. Is he the next Patrick Mahomes? There's a lot of weird comparisons going on around Trey Lance. He could go as early as 3 from what I've heard with the 49ers because they're jumbling back and forth between him and Mac Jones. Trey Lance could also end up at 15 to the Patriots for all we know. Trey Lance has a long range of where he can get drafted. He could get drafted anywhere from 3 to 32. He has a very long range. I don't think he has a true draft stock. And I think that is a lot because you're banking on somebody that kind of played nobodies. Not to say that he's not good, but Trey Lance really hasn't been tested. You're more so banking on the fact that he has potential to be something very good. I don't like basing that off of that. But Trey Lance, that doesn't mean he's a bad player. I think he's 13th best player in this year's draft. If I had to take, I would take 12 players above Trey Lance. 14th in this year's draft is Jalen Phillips out of Miami, defensive end. I think Jalen Phillips is actually the best defensive end in this year's class. You can make a case for Kwity Paye. I believe you could. But to me, Jalen Phillips has higher draft value than Kwity Paye. I could see Jalen Phillips jumping high up the board because of his athleticism, where I could see Kwity Paye possibly falling down the board. I think Jalen Phillips, I'd be comfortable having him at 14th on my big board. Then 15th, finally the fall of number 3 probably in this year's draft, Mac Jones. To me, Mac Jones is not a great quarterback. He is the 5th best quarterback in this year's draft to me. If I'm a team that is desperate for a QB, I'm not going to Mac Jones. To me, Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Mac Jones. I think Jimmy Garoppolo still has a higher ceiling at his age right now than Mac Jones will have a ceiling. Mac Jones is a quarterback, to me at least, that you can have him in your system. You can be confident in him as a backup. You can be confident in him as a quality starter. If you're one of those borderline playoff teams, if you're maybe down if you're like the Saints, you have talent around him. I'm not convinced that he's going to be able to turn his team around. I don't think he's better. I don't think he's going to improve the team that they think that he's going to do if he does go to the 49ers. I think he's a solid guy. I don't think he's as solid as people are giving him credit as, though. So that might be a little bit of a factor why he fell to 15, because he really should not be going in the top 3, and it's more than likely happening that he's going to be in the top 3, which I completely disagree with. 16th is Caleb Farley, corner out of Virginia Tech. Like I said, Caleb Farley, I think there's a big gap between him and Patrick Surtain. The gap is 6 players on my big board. He's a very good player, Caleb Farley is. He could be even better than what I'm giving him credit to because he opted out. So he could be even better now than what he was. But Caleb Farley, I think, fits right in at 16. 17th, I have Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia. I love Azeez Ojulari. One of the best names in this year's draft at linebacker. Very talented linebacker out of Georgia. In all of my mocks, I've had him drafted to the Cardinals. I don't know why, to me, Azeez Ojulari feels like a Cardinal. I'm not sure exactly why, because if you look at the Cardinals, obviously they just got J.J. Watt. It doesn't make much sense for them. But then again, it's just one of those gut feelings I had, because back a few years ago, I had a gut feeling that Gardner Minshew was going to end up on the Jaguars, and guess where he ended up? Now, obviously, this is two completely different situations because Aziz is obviously not going to be. Aziz is going to be a first rounder. He is going to be a first rounder. That's where Gardner wasn't. 18th on my big board, Zaven Collins. I absolutely love Zaven Collins. I think this guy is a very traditional linebacker. I don't think he's going to give you some of the athleticism and dominance that some of the other linebackers can give you, but I do value him above those linebackers. The only one I don't value him above, I don't value him above Micah and Aziz, but Zaven Collins, to me, is a very solid linebacker. I just get vibes where this guy is going to come in, he's going to know exactly what he's got to do, he's going to play his role. He might not be the most athletic guy, he might not go out there, and he might not be able to get you 140-something tackles like a Roquan Smith, but he's going to be in there, he's going to know his role, he's going to be able to be a great play caller defensively. I think that Zaven Collins has a lot of potential out of Tulsa. I don't expect him to be necessarily dominant like some of the linebackers in the league. I expect him to be consistent. I expect him to be a very good linebacker, not necessarily a phenomenal great linebacker, but one of those linebackers that will always have a place on a team because he is that good. 19th, I have Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota, receiver. Bateman, to me, I think he has interesting value because I could see him in the second round. If you're looking at pure overall what should happen, Bateman's a first-round pick. If you look at his film, it suggests Bateman's a first-round pick. But I think potentially we could see guys like Kadarius Toney jump him. I think we could potentially see Rondale Moore jump him. I think we could potentially see Terrence Marshall jump him. I think there's a lot of those receivers that kind of are not necessarily round one receivers, but have something special about them, like the speed of Kadarius Toney. I think potentially we could see him fall a little bit. Hopefully that's not the case because I believe Rashad Bateman's a really good player. But we'll see on Thursday. 20th, I have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame, linebacker. I love Koramoah's game. I think he's going to be very good in the league. To me, though, Koramoah, he has interesting value. I could see him drafted early, and I can see him drafted late. I could see him drafted probably as early as 13 to the Chargers, and I could also see him drafted potentially into the late 20s. He's a good player. He's a good player. I don't necessarily know if the dominoes all fall perfectly, he's going to be in the right situation early in the draft. If the dominoes don't, then he ain't going that high. 21 is Elijah Vera Tucker, very versatile offensive lineman at a USC. I think you plug him in almost anywhere on the offensive line. Elijah Vera Tucker, one of the guys that's been associated with Chicago many different times. I think he's one of those quality offensive linemen there in the middle of the first round that you'll be able to get, and maybe even early day two if we potentially see some sort of slide because of other players getting their names called before him. 22, I have Najee Harris. To me, Najee Harris is a very good running back. The one issue I do have with him is he is a running back, so draft value would suggest it shouldn't be that high because he's not like a Saquon, he's not a Leonard Fournette, he's not one of those guys that were considered an elite back. He's a very good back, but he's not an elite back. And to me, I don't see him being better than a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't think that he's necessarily got as high a value as some of those guys. But at the end of the day, he's a very good running back. I mean, draft value is some of those guys. I'd take Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a draft before I would take Najee Harris. But in my big board, I would take Najee Harris 22nd because he has the talent there. Might not necessarily translate on draft day because running backs don't get good draft stock. They don't. And that's not me trying to narc on anything with Najee. It's they don't have good draft stock. They don't have good draft stock. Running backs are literally plug and play. The way the NFL runs is they're a plug and play. You get them for 4 years, you let them walk, you get somebody else, you do the same thing, repeat the process, continues down the line. It's not fair. A lot of guys got their careers kind of cut short. Jamal Charles, one of them. Obviously, Adrian Peterson, kind of not in the same role as what he used to be. There's a lot of DeMarco Murray. There's teams give up on players all the time. They give up on players all the time. And it's just one of those positions where that's a position where they're going to give up on you at running back. Unfortunate for Najee Harris that he plays that position, but he's a very good player at that position. 23rd, I have Kwity Paye. Like I said, Kwity Paye to me, I think he's good. But I think he does lack some of the potential that maybe Jalen Phillips gives you. That's why I think Jalen Phillips is very talented right now, and I think he has higher potential too. That's why I have him so high on my draft board. Whereas Kwity Paye, I think, he has a high floor. I'm not exactly sure how high his ceiling is, though. That's why I have him at 23. 24, a guy that was in that cornerback debate that I mentioned, J.C. Horn out of South Carolina. Very good corner. I wouldn't mind if Chicago ended up with him. But like I said, there's a big gap between Patrick Surtain and the rest of the corners, at least in my opinion. So J.C. Horn ended up at 24. Not that he's a bad player. I just do not think anybody at that defensive back position is going to touch what Patrick Surtain is. 25, Christian Barmore, defensive tackle. This is a guy that might fall through the cracks a little bit because defensive tackle is not necessarily a position of need in the NFL. He's not going to be one of those dominant defensive tackles where you have him at the high end of the draft because you think he's going to be that game wrecker. He is going to be very good in the league. He's not going to have high draft stock. He'll be there past the 20s. So one of those teams in those 20s, 30s, and potentially in the 40s, if he falls far enough, they're going to have a chance at a very good defensive tackle in Christian Barmore because I'm telling you, this guy might fall a little bit. And with each tick of the picks, I think teams might be looking at their board and be like, wait a minute. We kind of just messed up because we did go out and we get a skill player, but you know who we didn't see on our board that hasn't been drafted yet? Barmore. We got to trade up. Barmore is one of those guys that I think could be very solid. 26, I have Tevin Jenkins. I'm not sure what his real draft value is going to end up being. I've seen him anywhere from day 1 to day 2. I think Tevin Jenkins is going to be a very good player out of Oklahoma State. I think he's going to be one of those top offensive linemen in this year's draft. I think he is more so of a first round pick than the Jalen Mayfields. That doesn't mean that I don't think Jalen Mayfield's going to go above him. I think that Tevin Jenkins is more polished right now. I think he deserves to be a first round pick. Not necessarily know whether or not that's going to happen, but I really think Tevin Jenkins, if given the right scenario, he could be very good. 27th, love-hate relationship here. 27th, I have Kadarius Toney, receiver out of Florida. Kadarius Toney, I think, could be very, very good. I just hate the idea, though, of a lot of those teams drafting him in those 20s. I've seen Chicago linked to him at 20. I think 20 is a little bit too early. Toney, I don't think his real draft value is necessarily at the 27 that I think his draft board value is. I think Toney might see a slide into day 2. So in order to get your bang for your buck, if I'm one of those teams, I would actually wait to get Kadarius Toney until day 2. Not necessarily anything against Kadarius Toney. I just think you can get better value for him in the second round than you can in the first round. I think he will be there in that second round. So I don't think there's much need for people to jump up. I think he's the 27th best player in the draft, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to end up getting drafted 27th. 28th, we just mentioned him, Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan. Very solid offensive lineman. He's going to be one of those guys that you can plug in. He could be very solid for one of those teams towards the later half of the first round, maybe even second round, early second round. He's going to end up on one of those teams like a Chiefs. He's going to end up on one of those teams down that line where potentially you could see them adding another offensive lineman. Maybe a Chicago in the second round. Maybe a Jets. One of those teams that necessarily don't have a good offensive line, then you could potentially add him there. 29th, I have Travis Etienne out of Clemson. Travis Etienne, if we were talking before this year, before watching Alabama play this year, I would have told you Etienne was the best running back in the draft. To me, Najee Harris got that just the way he's played last year. Etienne, still a very good running back in my opinion. I think he'll be kind of along the lines of what they have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary doing. You can have him, but I don't necessarily think he is going to be the primary running back. I think he'll be a additional running back to a guy like, let's say Chicago takes him. He'll be the 1-2 punch with him and David Montgomery. He'll be the 1-2 punch with whomever he ends up on. I don't think he is going to be number one. I don't think he's going to be the workhorse. I think he will be a complimentary back. 30th, I got Greg Newsome out of Northwestern. I think Greg Newsome, a little bit underrated. I think this guy could fall a little bit, and I think this guy could rise a little bit. I'm not exactly sure where his real draft value is going to end up lying on Thursday. I could see him being a first-round pick. I could see him sliding through the cracks. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen with him. I wouldn't be upset if Chicago took him. Very solid defensive back out of Northwestern. It'd be interesting to see where he goes. 31 to me is Trevon Moehrig out of TCU, Texas Christian University. First safety off the board, by far the best safety. Hamsad Nasirderland doesn't even come close to him, in my opinion. But to me, Moehrig is not a can't-miss safety. He's good, but he doesn't necessarily have anything about him where I'm going to go out there. I'm going to draft him early in the draft. I'm sorry to say that. 32, I think, is Rondale Moore, receiver out of Purdue. Now, in my actual mock draft, I do have Rondale Moore going above Kadarius Toney because I think Rondale Moore probably has the higher draft value because he is, if you've seen his game, it translates very well with the NFL, and where Kadarius Toney is kind of hit or miss. We've seen speed receivers get into the NFL. We've seen good slot receivers get into the NFL, but they don't always work out. I like Toney more than I like Rondale Moore, but I think Rondale Moore is probably going to get drafted before Toney. 33 is Gregory Rousseau, defensive end out of Miami. Gregory Rousseau, very good player. Unfortunate for him that he's at 33. I think he's still solid. I think he could end up in the first round. I actually did have him in mid-first round earlier on this year. But to me, just watching more film, I think Jalen Phillips is probably the better defensive end there. Tight end, Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. He's the second best tight end of this year's class. I think there's three good tight ends that you can plug in here in this year's draft and have a good. I'm going to be honest with you guys. If I'm Chicago, I'm kicking myself. I'm really kicking myself. Don't get me wrong. I like Cole Kmet. I do. But, man, this year's tight end class, man. Yeah, Kyle Pitts. Who I think will be an elite tight end. You had Pat, and you're going to have Brevin Jordan in it. You're telling me that we couldn't get one of them? Not that I don't like Cole. Cole had a very solid season. But, man, we could have potentially got an offensive lineman last year. So, I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but Jeez, this tight end class is actually pretty solid. Next, I have 35 as Davion Nixon, second best defensive tackle in my opinion, out of Iowa. I think he could fall too. I told you about Barmore potentially falling. I think we could see the same thing happen with Davion Nixon. I think he's a very solid player, but at the end of the day, I can't really think of what team would be so needy of a defensive tackle. Because you're going to have some of the good defensive ends there. You're going to have a bunch of good edge rushers. You're going to have some good linebackers. I mean, it's not necessarily, if you need a front seven member, you got to take defensive tackle. It's more so you're going to have your option between them. You're going to have your option between Basham. You're going to potentially have an option between a lot of different outside linebackers and defensive ends. Next, we have Samuel Cosmi at 36, Texas offensive lineman. Very solid. I think he's a little bit of a project. I'm going to be honest with you guys. He is a little bit of a project. But Samuel Cosmi, solid offensive lineman. Going to have to use a little bit of work there. But he's the 36th player on my draft board. 37th, Terrence Marshall, receiver out of Louisiana State University. A lot of you guys might be saying, what the fuck is Louisiana State University? It's LSU. I always like saying on Louisiana State University because it always confuses people. Terrence Marshall, very solid receiver. I could see a situation where he falls to round 3. This guy's going to be solid. He is going to be solid. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. 38, one of my favorite players in this year's draft is Asante Samuel Jr. I love this dude. Obviously, Asante Samuel Jr., if you can connect the dots. Asante Samuel, a very good player. Asante Samuel Jr. playing for Florida State, defensive back. Now, maybe it's that I'm kind of pushing him up the board a little bit because of his name. Maybe that helps him a little bit, but if Asante Samuel Jr. is even half of what his father was, I think it's going to be pretty safe there. Asante Samuel Jr., I think is going to be a very solid player. 39th, I have Dylan Radunz, a little bit of a project at offensive line still out of North Dakota State. Once again, in a conference, not necessarily a big conference, but Dylan Radunz, I think, is a solid offensive lineman. I think he could potentially be a quality starting offensive lineman, but he doesn't have first-round talent, if you ask me. He's more so that second-tier, second-round, third-round kind of guy. Next, we have Jay Tufele out of USC, defensive tackle. If you want to have fun saying somebody's name, say Jay Tufele, because that's an amazing name. Also, one of the top defensive tackles in this year's draft. I think there is a little bit of a gap between him and Nixon, but Tufele, you're not getting a bad player if you do draft him. 41, a guy that has interesting value, and I mean very interesting value, because this guy should not be a round 1 pick. But because of certain teams, a.k.a. my team, Chicago, they might end up being a first-round pick. Because I know that a lot of Bears fans are talking about him. That's Kellen Mond. Now, I like Kellen Mond. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a very solid quarterback out of Texas A&M. I get it. I get what you see. I get that you can get the comparisons to Dak because he's going to be falling through the cracks a little bit. He's an athletic quarterback. I understand. But what I don't understand is why you would draft him over a lot of other guys. I just don't think he's as good as some of the other in terms of quality over. Sometimes you got to take the quality picks over just a pick out of desperation. You can't get that desperate at pick 20. You just can't. If you want to trade back up early second round, be my guest. But I don't know if that is as high of a value as you want Kellen Mond at. He could also go round 3 for all we know. But Kellen Mond is a very solid quarterback. I wouldn't bust the bank to get him in round 1. But I think if you get him in round 2, you'll be very happy. 42 is Javonte Williams. Now, I don't think this guy is going to get his name called very early on in this year's draft. I think his name might actually slip down, maybe even round 3, round 4. This guy's good. Very, very good. If you've watched any North Carolina games, the guy knows how to run the football. Unfortunately, I don't know what his draft stock's going to end up being because, well, running backs, we all know, don't have great draft value anymore. And you can plug and place wherever you want. So maybe we could go as early as round 2. Maybe he'll fall a little bit. Who knows? But Devontae Williams, you're not getting a bad player if you get him. I want to see him drafted to Chicago, but he probably won't be because we don't need to be wasting a top 3 or our first 3 round picks on him. I'm sorry, I love him, but I don't think we need to do that. We have bigger needs. 43 is Carlos Basham Jr. at a Wake Forest defensive end. I think this guy has potential to be something solid. I think this guy could end up as early as round 1. Basham's going to be a solid player in the NFL. 44, I have Aaron Robinson. To me, he's going to be one of those next-tier corners. And I don't mean necessarily a second tier. I mean more so like a 2.5. Asante Samuel, to me, is a second tier. And then there's Aaron Robinson, where I think he's going to be very good, but I don't necessarily think he's going to be – I don't think he has necessarily anything great about him. So I got him at 44. 45, I actually have Kyle Trask, believe it or not. Kyle Trask falling down big boards, which is very shocking to me because Kyle Trask, after the way he played this season, he had crazy good status because he was rising up draft boards left and right. And then the offseason comes around and he starts falling down draft boards again. Kyle Trask, very solid player. You're gonna get a quarterback. That is, if you want a quarterback, you're getting him. He is a traditional big arm quarterback. Kyle Trask, if you want a guy that's going to go out there and get you 4,000 yards in a season, Chicago ending the 16-game season era, 17-week season era without a 4,000-yard quarterback, Kyle Trask might be that guy. 46, I had to get him in there, man. I love Brevin Jordan. I think Brevin Jordan is very similar to Kyle Pitts, but I don't think he has as elite of talent as Kyle Pitts. He can move all around the field. I've seen him do it in the Miami games. But to me, Kyle Pitts, man, when I see Kyle Pitts, I think that guy is literally going to be the next Gronk. I think he's literally going to be the next Kelsey. I think he's going to be an elite tight end. With Brevin Jordan, I think of average tight ends, man. I'm thinking of maybe a guy, who do I think of? I don't even know, man. I don't even know. But I think he's going to be quality. Not necessarily great, but he's going to be quality. If that helps you. Like a Mike Gesicki. But a little bit more moving around the field. 47th, I had to get him in here too, man. I love this guy. I hate that I have him low, but because I think he could potentially end up in the first round. I think he might end up in the first round. It's Nick Bolton. You can plug this guy in all over the field. Linebacker out of Missouri. He's very good. He's going to do what you need him to do. Might be a sleeper pick in this year's draft. Hate that I have him at 47, but it has to be at 47 because I'm sorry, but I think I could see him drafted in the first round, but I'm just going off of what I see, man. 48, Alex Leatherwood, offensive line out of Alabama. I actually think this guy's going to end up in the first round, but to me, I would take a lot of the other offensive linemen above him. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Leatherwood's game. I'm just not. I don't got much explanation as to why. I just don't think he's going to be as good as potentially some of the other guys that I have listed above him. Next, we have a Texas outside linebacker, and that is Joseph Ossai. Very good outside linebacker. I think he could be something that is going to be okay in the league. I don't think he's going to be great, but he could be very good. And 50, I got Dylan Moses. Absolutely love Dylan Moses. One of my favorite linebackers in this year's draft. Love to see him drafted to Chicago. I think he could probably end up in that 4th round. But Dylan Moses, I think, is a very quality linebacker, and I got him as my 50th best player in this year's draft. Got to shout out my boy Tutu Atwell. Unfortunately, you didn't make my top 50, even though I would love to have you on the team. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. But that's my big board, man. That is my big board for the NFL draft. You guys are seeing this on Tuesday, meaning tomorrow is going to be my mock draft. Now, I will be predicting both round 1 and 2. But unfortunately for you guys, you're not gonna get to hear. You're not gonna hear the full 7-round mock draft, but you will get to see it. You will get to see it because I will link it down below. It's gonna be very similar to what I have set up here now, where you can see where I'm gonna have a chart laid out. Obviously, I'm gonna turn off editing and all that stuff. But you guys will be able to see it. I will post about it and all that fun stuff. But draft week is upon us, man. And by the time you're seeing this, we got 2 more days. 2 more days. I am excited, man. I cannot wait to hear Chicago on the clock. I can't wait to see the Patriots on the clock. I can't wait to see the Bucks on the clock. And I cannot wait to see the Bills on the clock. Let me explain that to you before you sit there and say I'm a because that sounded very, very bad. Bears, number 1 team, obviously. Bears fan. Bear down. Patriots, obviously. I was there for a long time because of Tom Brady. They're my second favorite team because I got attachments to those players. But I still got attachments to my boy Tom Brady. Obviously, Mitch is over on the Bills now, along with my boy Josh Allen. There you go. That's the reason why I'm excited for their picks. Obviously, we still want to bear down and win the whole thing. So I'm not going to be mad, though, if my boy Mitch Trubisky goes out there and wins the Super Bowl with my boy Josh Allen. I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be mad. Tom Brady, go win another one, buddy. Go win another one. Or, you know what? Bill Belichick, go win another one, my guy. Tom did it. You can do it. Say, you know what? You could do it. I could do it. If you can do it, I can do it better. Do that, Bill. Come on. One of those 4 teams got to win a Super Bowl, man. One of those 4 teams, because I can be happy with any of them. Preferably Chicago, because that's my ride or die. That's my ride or die. As much as I hate stuff that goes around at Chicago, that's my ride or die. But I'm very excited for the draft, if you can't tell. I'm very excited. I love a lot of these guys in this year's draft, man. I feel like this year's draft is going to be, and I've already done this before, because I have known a lot of players in drafts before. But this is going to be a really fun draft for me because I know almost all these guys. I've seen them play. I've either seen them play or I've watched some film of them. I did a lot more scouting this year than I've done in the past. That's how I love Brevin Jordan. That's why I love Tutu Atwell. That's why I think Des Fitzpatrick might be around the 200 spot, but I think he might be getting somebody solid. That's why I think De'Ami Brown could be okay. Daz Newsome could be okay. Javonte Williams, very good. Did a lot more this year than I've done in the past. So I'm very excited about this year. Seeing a lot of these guys get drafted. Got my boys in Illinois getting drafted. Got my boys out in Oregon getting drafted. Javon Holland, shout out to him. Penei Sewell, shout out to him. A lot of those guys, Austin Fayola, shout out to him. Jordan Scott, shout out to him. Nate Hobbs, Illinois. Love-hate relationship there with him, but shout out to him. My boy Milo Eifler, shout out to him. Josh Matter-Bebe, shout out to him. Kendrick Green, shout out to him. I'm very excited about the draft. I'm very excited. But I'm going to get on out of here. I'm going to let you guys continue your day. But I hope you guys enjoy my top 50 of this year's draft. Let me know down below. You don't necessarily have to give me your top 50. Just let me know your top 5. Let me know if I'm tripping about Penei. Because I really think he's going to be an elite offensive lineman. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but that's just how my brain works. I know I was right about Justin Herbert, and this is one of those feelings that I get where I know I'm right, but I'm still questioning myself. I can either look like a fool or look like a genius like I did with Herbert. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see on Thursday. On Thursday, I will be live on draft day. That means I will be streaming. Now, you guys will not get to see the draft because I'm not getting copyrighted. No. But make sure you go follow me on Twitter at thegoongameryt for more information about that. Definitely going to be live tweeting during the draft all 3 days. I'm probably more than likely just going to I might react all the days. Who knows? We'll see. But after night one, I will come out and I will give you a review of night one, who I think won the draft and who I think didn't. And then I will do a full NFL draft recap. And then obviously we're gonna get a bunch of Bears videos out of it. We're gonna have to talk about whatever happens in the first round, maybe a big trade. There's a lot to talk about, man. There's a lot to talk about in the draft week, and I expect there to be some good stuff, man. I might get a Patriots video out because you got to support the boys. Might get a Buccaneers video out because we got to support the boy, and I might even go out there and make a Bills video for all I know because I got to support my two boys over there. Who knows? Who knows what we got going on this week, man? Who knows? Draft week's unpredictable. It's the one thing predictable about draft week is that it is unpredictable. You're not going to know what's going to happen. By the time your team's up on the clock, you ain't going to know. I'm telling you that right. Unless you're the Jaguars at 1 and the Jets at 2, you ain't going to know. You might think with Mac Jones, they could throw a curveball and give you Trey Lance. Who knows? The only thing I can say for sure about this draft is Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are going 1 and 2. That is the only thing certain about this year's draft. Who knows? It's going to be something crazy. Make sure you come tune in to the live stream, man. I'm looking forward to it. Definitely going to have some good reactions. I mean, it's a draft. It's a draft. I don't know the last time I've had bad reactions to a draft. There's always some shocker. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it's going to, if it's a Bears, if you see a Bears move, whether it's a draft pick or whether it is a trade, you tune into me, I swear I will be reacting to it some way or another. It's either going to be me freaking out or me being very glad. Well, there's no in between there. I'm not going to sit there and be like, okay. It's either, what the or it's going to be, okay, let's go, good job. That's the only two options there with the Bears. But we're going to be much more reserved with the other guys. Might be a little shocked, but we're going to see. We're going to see how the cookie crumbles come Thursday. That's simple, man. That's simple. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for my official final mock draft. It is a 2-round mock draft that you guys will be getting. You will be getting a 2-round. So that means 2 rounds. The first 64 picks you will be getting. Should be fun. And in the description of that, you'll get a full 7-rounder mock draft down there because I'm going to be honest with you, filming a 7-round mock draft sounds miserable. Because I know with myself going for 2 rounds, it's probably going to be over an hour. Give me 7 rounds, that thing lasts in 3-4 hours. And I really don't want to put you guys through that. But see, I'm just rambling at this point, 53 minutes in here. So I'll let you guys go. See you guys next time. It's been Gamer's Goon. Hope you guys enjoy the video.